Merħba l-episodju ieħor ta' The Malta-EU Business Gateway the MBB podcast. Fil-jiem li għaddew il-Malta Business Bureau organizzajna flimkien ma' rappreżentanza tal-Kummissjoni Ewropea f'Malta u flimkien mal-Climate Action Authority organizzajna webinar li fih ippreżentajna dettalji dwar il-Clean Industrial Deal lill-industrija Maltija. Kellima tal-Kummissjoni Ewropea, però wkoll mbagħad kellna dibattitu bejn erba' esperti, dibattitu li llum ħankunu qegħdin nipproponulkom f'dan il-podcast. L-esperti Andrew Agius Muscat, il-kap eżekuttiv tal-Malta Hotels and Restaurants Association, Jasmine Xkembri, rappresentanta ta' The Malta Chamber u anka konsulent minn AIS Environment, l-inġinier Abigail Kutajjar, kap eżekuttiv ta' Climate Action Authority u l-professur Luciano Mulestagno mill-Università ta' Malta. The MBB podcast jibda issa. Dan il-podcast huwa miġjub lilkom minn The Energy and Water Agency, l-Aġenzija għall-Enerġija u l-Ilma.
And I would like to start off by asking each and every one of you to react, to express your thoughts, to criticize if need be, to tell us what you think about the Clean Industrial Deal. Professor Mulestagno, Luciano, perhaps you can go first.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting and useful elements in this deal. So the EU is a very particular entity because it depends, of course, on what the EU does, but then it's also intertwined with the individual countries. When we think industrial manufacturing, of course, we're thinking on a local level, but you have countries which are much bigger than us that also have their own framework superimposed on top of the EU. I think a lot of these initiatives are good. I obviously haven't looked in detail at each one of them. I agree that there are some disadvantages for EU manufacturers and for EU producers, like electricity prices and other things. However, there are also some inherent weaknesses in the EU landscape, which I don't think this deal will address. Companies can or production can either come bottom up or top down. China does it mostly top down. The rest of the world does it bottom up. And bottom up, unfortunately, I don't think the EU is producing enough. And I think that's part of the weakness that we have of why we have lost a lot of our high-tech manufacturing. Thanks.
Abigail, it's your turn.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting us as Climate Action Authority to this webinar. First of all, it was very insightful to hear Giuseppina. It's good to hear the upcoming deal also from the Commission's end, and it's important obviously to also understand what's in it for us as well as an island state. Obviously, our realities are are surely different than other member states, but and obviously I can say this because I used to be in the realm of things even before, to manage to come up with a deal in such a short time, adaptable and applicable to all member states is no easy feat, especially with all that's going on right now, with all the geopolitics. This was something which we discussed, Mario, as well, even before all the geopolitics that is currently going on. Even this morning, there was also another announcement. All of these things would obviously impact the transition and the economical transition. And with that also comes the sustainable and the carbonization transition. Obviously, one thing which we need to keep focus on is the fact that this deal, as opposed to the Green Deal, is focusing on competitiveness and not just about the targets. And I see something positive about it. Obviously, some parts of it will not be entirely applicable to Malta, especially when it comes to the heavy energy sectors, the industries, the heavy industries, which are not really applicable to us. But then there are some other things like the clean tech industries, which are applicable to us. And I think that is where us as Malta needs to tap into. I agree with Luciano, it can't be top down, it needs to be bottom up as well, because ultimately the main beneficiaries are going to be the industries, the people, and ultimately the citizens.
Great. Thank you, Abigail. I mean, Jasmine, Abigail has just said that we have to put the clean industrial deal, to place it into context, basically. What are your impressions so far since it was announced earlier this year?
Good afternoon. Thank you again for the invite. As Abigail and as Giuseppina mentioned, the CID is extremely ambitious. It aims to encourage decarbonization and merging with it increase competitiveness, and this would help increase the Europe's security. This is extremely ambitious, as I said. The European Commission is highlighting the synergy between competitiveness and sustainability or circular economy. It emphasizes what we already know, that sustainability aims to prevent the waste of resources such as raw materials, energy, water, etc. These resources cost money, so it stands to reason that striving towards sustainability saves money and increases businesses' competitiveness in the EU market. The CID leverages sustainability as a tool for economic growth, which is very interesting and very exciting. Achieving this sustainability needs both resources and funding, though, which are much easier for large corporations to access. In Malta, 94% of our companies are small to micro, and therefore it's important that companies look towards, first and foremost, environmental consultants to provide the necessary resources and expertise. But the second part, a critical part, is strong funding opportunities. Strong funding means availability of realistic and attractive funds, and secondly, improved ease of access to such funds. If I use the Porto Masso Tower as a metaphor for the CID, I feel that the funds to assist in integrating these clean technologies form the foundation of the tower, il pedamenti del Malti. Without such strong funding, the CID tower will collapse and the objectives will simply not be achieved. So I'm very, very keen and excited to see what funding will be made available in Malta through the new frameworks that the CID is pushing for.
Okay, some very interesting perspectives there, but we have also Andrew Muscat, who is the CEO of the Malta Hotels and Restaurants Association. Andrew, what is your take from a hospitality perspective?
Good afternoon, Mario. Thank you for the invite. Of course, I'll be presenting the tourism perspective to this debate. And despite that, from what I read, the CID does not tackle directly the tourism industry. Of course, it's very relevant to us because we are an industry, a sector which is very highly dependent on energy. And from the information that we have is that the tourism sector usually is one of the main consumers of energy in an economy. This implies also that it has a high cost impact. So looking at it from a perspective of cost impact, anything which supports the industry in reducing this cost will definitely be embraced by the industry. But it's a chicken and egg, and as Jasmine was mentioning, as an industry, as the people on the front line, we're already being hit by a number of deals, regulations, and whatever. Every month, every 6 months, new regulations are conceived and then, of course, set on us. Complicated, I have to say also, because, of course, we're not the experts in the field. Our area of expertise in our case is the tourism sector. And we try to manage what's coming on the latest. Sometimes, as happened with the Green Deal, I have to say there was a big deal about the Green Deal, but then really it got lost somewhere. And now we have another deal. So there's a little bit of skepticism too when these new concepts are presented to us by Brussels. Having said that, I think I should not be misinterpreted as if I'm saying that there is a conflict between sustainability and competitiveness. As I mentioned, as an industry, we recognize very well the importance of going greener, But we require assistance. We require the assistance both in terms of knowledge in itself, so the role of the universities, the role of the researchers, the role of the suppliers in this field need to be closer to the industry to present us with ideas. Because as we've seen, when it comes to solar panels and other kind of technologies, the hotel industry, as a specific case, were amongst the first to embrace solar panel technology, for example, because immediately it was recognized that this could support even cutting the cost just by looking just at the cost. But apart from the funding itself, then come the conditions to this funding. So the information about the funding, the amounts of the funding, but even the conditions. We keep on repeating the same thing in different fora. But it seems that the message is not coming across, that there are so many conditions that many times the potential users are put off from pursuing such incentives, such funding, because it costs them more to manage the progress in terms of managing the funding rather than focusing on the core business that they are set for. So positive, yes. That there is, it's an interesting development because at the end of the day, it's a reaction also to what's happening in the market. But it's not a walk in the park. It's not just a question of presenting documents and rules, but we really need a lot of assistance on the field.
Great. So we had the first round of reactions from the panelists. I'm coming back to you, Luciano. I wish you can develop the argument you made earlier with regards to the weaknesses, but let me frame it in a question kind of statement. The Clean Industrial Deal emphasizes scaling up the manufacturing capacity for key clean technologies. Now, Europe, therefore, is aiming to become a leader in such manufacturing, also to sustain its own demand for tech. I mean, from your own experience, especially in solar materials research and manufacturing, how realistic is this ambition? Can Europe really meet its clean tech demand through local production?
I think it's a mixed situation. When it comes to solar panels, in many ways, the ship has sailed. So unfortunately, Europe did not act fast enough when it should have acted fast enough. Neither did the US, by the way. So it wasn't just Europe at fault. When China ramped up their production, and now it's completely dominated. And it's not just a matter of, we try to look at China and say it's because of regulations, et cetera. But it's not just that, it's also scale. So the largest European manufacturing facility currently is probably something like 1 gigawatt peak. And in China, you have the biggest one at 100 times that size. So, we're not going to bring back that manufacturing. I think it's very, very unlikely. We can rely on specialized products. So there are plenty of niche products which still require, and in fact, in many cases, they would be high-value items. So manufacturing of high-value items in Europe can still happen. And I think the biggest opportunity, which is still there, but we could still lose it, is cars and batteries. So both batteries, there is a healthy number of manufacturing plants in Europe, including, by the way, foreign ones, like Chinese ones that are setting shop in Europe. And I think that's obviously going to be a huge market, both in Europe and in the world. And there you have a big advantage. It's the advantage of cost, because since they're heavy objects, there's an incentive to manufacturing them close to where it's going to be used. So when it comes to cars, electric cars, and batteries, I think Europe still can incentivize the right players to help them grow and create a healthy production in Europe. We do have to worry about, of course, competition, technology, and we also have to worry about, I think the biggest problem is reacting quickly when things change. So we acted quite quickly with the pandemic and with the war. But for example, like I said, when China flooded the market with solar panels and the price of panels fell by half, we did not act quickly enough, and all the manufacturers in Europe shut down. So this could still also happen with other clean tech technologies. However, the incentives mentioned in this package, which I agree with Abigail, is a very remarkable package to put together in such a short time, will help the manufacturers. So the ingredients are there. We just need to put them together.
Okay, great. Abigail, let's come closer to home. You are the CEO of the Malta Climate Action Authority. How do you see the clean industrial deal aligning with Malta's national climate action goals and your authority's own mandate to drive effective and economically efficient mitigation and adaptation efforts? I mean, let's frame it a bit differently. What specific opportunities within the deal are most relevant for Malta's industrial transition towards climate neutrality? We can't hear you, Abigail. Perhaps you can switch on your mic.
Okay. Obviously, the deal itself, it's a follow-up, it's a step up, if I dare say, on the green deal. So it is a push for more clean energy. It's a push for more renewables, more electrification. Obviously, while making sure that security of supply and affordability is still in the realm of everything. We know that if something is green but it's not secure, you're going to obviously be suffering the impact. So this is something which, as a climate action authority and also as a government, I may dare say, it's something which we welcome openly because it is aligned with the decarbonization strategy also of the government, and also not just the government, I believe, as Malta as a nation. Because it's something which is going to lead us to a better quality of life, both to the citizens and also to the businesses. Obviously, as Climate Action Authority, we're working closely. Don't forget that this is not a done deal. It is still in discussions. There are still discussions ongoing, and that is why
it's a work in progress, basically.
Exactly, it's a work in progress, and that is why it's important that Malta is in the center of the discussions. And in fact, as a Climate Action Authority, we are indeed speaking both with the public sector and with the private sector. Through our projects team as well, we are helping in expanding. I'm going to give tangible examples. For instance, we're working towards finding the gaps that there are and bridging those gaps. For instance, we're working with the private sector, with the public sector to expand initiatives when it comes to clean energy. We're working also with the private sector as well to transition and push forward towards electrification and electric vehicle charging network. We're also working and exploring cleaner fuel options, and not just hydrogen or electrification. We're also working towards the exploitation and exploring, for instance, of biofuels. I believe that all of this would need to tie up with potential EU funding opportunities, because obviously you can speak as much as you want, but unless you have the funding, unless the private and the public sector have access to funds, everything will remain on paper. And also, I tend to agree also with the fact that there needs to be a streamlining of bureaucracy. And in fact, this deal specifically mentions this, that there needs to be a less bureaucratic approach for the people, for the businesses to find an opportunity in all of this. Because sometimes we are tied up with the processes, with processes which obviously need to be adhered to. But if it is bureaucratic, then the businesses would tend to proceed in their own steam, and not rather access these funds. And we're working very much in close communication with EU funds as well, in order to start understanding what are the opportunities. So the mobilization of funds are there. The EIB is included. The bureaucracy, there's a commitment that the bureaucracy would reduce. There's a commitment that the procurement processes will be reduced, because we sometimes speak about access to funds, but also the procurement processes sometimes are hindering the actual acceleration of the energy and clean transition. One other thing which we're working as a climate action authority is to understand what type of skills and educational programs we require to do the transition. And this is something which Giuseppina actually spoke about. I mean, she also spoke about the fact that there are 5 member states which have highlighted this. Because we can have the technologies available, we can have the access to funds, but if we do not have the workforce to actually sustain that transition, we're still going to have a gap. So these are all the things that currently we're working towards as an authority in order to ensure that we are prepared for this deal as well.
Okay, Jasmine, from your perspective, how will the deal impact the demand and the delivery of essential management and supporting services? I mean, such as EIAs, for instance, or sustainable resource management. Can consultancy services capitalize on the objectives of the Clean Industrial Deal? And how can they do it?
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned EIAs and sustainable resource management. I'm going to split them in two because they're quite different. So EIAs form part of the permitting process, and these are necessary for large-scale energy infrastructure projects, including renewable energy. As Abigail mentioned, and as Giuseppina mentioned, there has been a push from the EU to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy. One way of doing that is to accelerate the permitting, and this included assessments such as EIAs. For example, it shortened the permitting process for the installation of solar energy equipment to 3 months. It also actually allowed exemptions for certain renewable energy projects from EIAs. So this framework was, although it was originally intended to apply for 18 months, it was actually extended and will expire in 30th June. There is no official indication that the framework will be extended, but it will likely feed into this Clean Industrial Deal. And there is, as part of the Clean Industrial Deal, as Giuseppina mentioned, there's the Action Plan for Affordable Energy and the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, both of which will possibly build upon this existing framework and continue pushing for the acceleration of the permitting and the reduction of bureaucracy, as Abigail mentioned. Issa, does that mean that there will be no EIAs for large-scale projects? Unlikely in reality, but nevertheless, it's very critical that the permitting process is made as efficient as possible. To do this, processes that are typically done as part of the EIA, such as identifying impacts, mitigating against them, and possibly redesigning projects to integrate these mitigation measures, that bit should be done before. Project designers and investors must work hand in hand with environmental consultants at early stages so that, number one, the challenging legislations, Andrew mentioned this as well, the constantly changing legislations are taken on board immediately and there aren't any complications, and ensure that any environmental impacts are integrated into the design early on to simplify the process, to avoid redesign efforts, as these can, of course, affect timelines and affect expenses. The second bit you mentioned is the sustainable resource management, which is more related to the operations of such facilities. Facilities in Malta, which are, as I mentioned already, primarily SMEs. One of the important aspects is the focus on circular economy and resource efficiencies. The deal's emphasis on circularity, will drive demand for consultancy services because as consultants, we can guide businesses in optimizing resource use, waste management, and raw material recycling. Maltese companies, again, primarily SMEs, will need this expert advice to redesign their processes to align with the CID objectives. One of the ways, another way in which this will be integrated is the energy transition and infrastructure development. So Malta has a small market, and it has a unique island context, which implies specific challenges in energy infrastructure development and the integration of renewables for businesses. Environmental consultancy will be critical in planning, permitting, and managing these projects, because it's not just, we're not talking about a one-time effort, to integrate these projects such as renewable projects, but it's a constant need to review what is happening, to monitor what is happening, what the benefits are, and upgrade and continuously improve on energy efficiency practices, etc., etc. I will repeat a bit here, but now we're talking the investment opportunities, as has been mentioned. There's over 100 billion in funding across the EU for clean industrial projects. Maltese businesses need to be able to access such funding, and they need to lean on consultancy services to prepare high quality applications, because otherwise they risk not obtaining this funding and causing delays, causing additional costs and all this stuff. And then the objectives of the CID would not be achieved.
Thanks, Jasmine. Andrew, you already spoke. You underscored, you highlighted, I can say, the importance of affordable and reliable energy generation for the Maltese hospitality industry. Now, Jasmine just mentioned the integration of renewable energy in the system. How critical is this for hospitality? In both in terms of electricity and water, I must say. Andrew, your mic, I think, is still switched off.
I have to say, after listening to my colleagues in the panel, I have to say a big wow. This is another tsunami coming ahead on us. Because as we mentioned, we embrace, we understand the importance of going greener. We understand that even by adopting such perspectives to our operations, they help us also to reduce the costs in our operations. However, there is a major issue here in terms of knowledge, know-how on the field, the time which requires to re-engineer our processes, and money. When we have to keep in mind that we are in business, we are in the tourism business, not in the environmental business. So the key focus here is to try to manage the dynamics of keeping our country, our industry, competitive enough in a very dynamic economic sector, international-wise. And at the same time, we are being used, within inverted commas, as a lab to check, to see how we can, putting the pressure on us, really and truly, because, of course, we draft the policies, we draft the regulations, but then we are the guinea pigs on the front line to see how we can change, literally, revamp, literally, our business operations. And this we have to keep in mind in parallel along with other challenges which the industry is facing, such as, for example, artificial intelligence. Even on that front, it's another way. Technology, artificial intelligence in particular, is radically changing the way we need to operate. So again, it's not going to be a walk in the park. I don't want to be negative. I just want to be realistic. In the sense that if we really believe in what we are writing, if we really believe in the vision that we're setting, we need to also be realistic in taking this transition step by step, hand in hand with the operators on the front line, because otherwise we risk to be facing yet another big surprise that, it will be fine, great policies put to paper, but eventually very little be seen on the ground.
Very interesting insights and contribution. Luciano, perhaps you may wish to react to what's been said so far, but I have a question for you as well, just the same. How do you believe the Clean Industrial D's focus on research and innovation on strategic technology can best support the deployment of novel renewable energy technologies, which are tailored to Malta's specific context? Can it actually contribute to the local context?
It can. In fact, I mentioned niche products. When I say niche products, I didn't necessarily mean small products. For example, Malta, we have a big problem that we don't have a lot of land. So we're focusing on offshore. A lot of those technologies are still being developed, and in many cases, in some cases, Malta is at the forefront of that technology, both in energy storage at the University of Malta with my colleagues, and in offshore solar in our group, in fact. And there is potential that technology could be developed right here in Malta, continue being developed here in Malta, but definitely it can be deployed here and potentially result even in an industry. In Europe, there's definitely a huge opportunity for this industry to take hold and to become sustainable. As it happens next month, for example, there's a seminar in Turkey, about offshore floating. Actually, in their case, it's also onshore floating, but it's an area which is taking hold in Europe. Panels have matured. In Europe now, we probably have something like 600 to 800 million panels installed already on land. So obviously, we have to look for other opportunities. And in many cases, those opportunities for places like Malta will be at sea. And the same thing with wind farms. There's still a lot of activity on land, but in places like Malta, it's going to have to be at sea. So I think there's an opportunity there. And with what Jasmine said earlier, and also Abigail, with streamlining processes, fast tracking, making it simpler, we're going to have those things because these projects are already very, very, very complex, especially the wind, by the way. There's already a lead time of several years as it is. So if we create bureaucracy, it might not happen in time. And by the way, the solar thing, we already mentioned the circular economy. The solar is going to create a huge opportunity for recycling. In the next 5 years, the first wave of panels will need to be recycled. And then eventually batteries will need to be recycled. And that in itself can be quite a big industry. I mentioned my estimate is 600 to 800 million panels installed in Europe. So we're going to have to recycle all those over the next 20 or so years. So if we create that industry here, rather than ship them somewhere else, that could be an opportunity in itself. The technology is being created here. In fact, we just received an Horizon project just this week, in fact, with a very large consortium of industries in Europe to develop efficient ways to recycle solar panels.
Good to hear. That's very good news indeed, Luciano. Andrew, I would like to turn to you because Luciano just mentioned Turkey, and I know you're interested in all things Mediterranean, not just Malta. We are interested in the Maltese hospitality sector, of course, but Malta is in the context of the Mediterranean. How prepared is the Mediterranean hospitality industry to invest in greener infrastructure or technologies, and what are the main barriers currently holding it back? I mean, is it just a question of financing? How can you compare the situation in Malta with other countries in the Mediterranean? Switch off your microphone, please.
When we're talking about the Mediterranean, Mario, as you, of course, understand, we're talking about a world in itself. I mean, if you're talking about South Europe, it's one thing. If we're talking about North Africa, is another thing. And if you talk about Middle East, it's another thing. So the situation, the realities faced by these different regions of the Mediterranean, of course, are different when it comes to adapting to climate change friendly initiatives. Of course, probably the most advanced is South Europe, because of course, being part of the European Union, that sets the industry ahead of the other industries. And yes, of course, we do see the importance. I mean, this I underline, Mario, the fact that we see the importance of going greener, the need to go for more sustainability. However, we cannot just ignore the realities of the industry itself. So this is very important. We keep it at the core in our decision making, because as I mentioned before, it's easy to put ideas to paper and vision, which are very important, but we need to understand the realities of the industry. If you look at North African countries, for example, certain regulations which have been endorsed, always in the light of going greener by the European Union, have placed them as more competitive than EU member states such as Malta. So whereas, on paper it seems to be fantastic, great, we're going greener. However, in terms of business, certain countries who are not part of the European Union, and particularly these are the North African countries, which are important tourism destinations in the world, have been placed from a cost perspective, from a competitive perspective, they've been given an edge, a positive edge on EU countries. Now, of course, one can debate, yes, but we are better, we are more ethical, we love the world more than the other competitive destinations.
And I believe, Andrew, that you can see it from another perspective, from the perspective that there is a potential market out there of tourists who would like to stay in hotels that are greener, and they are ready to pay for that, right?
I'll be honest with you, Mario. I mean, yes, we can debate that, we can give a lot of color to that, but at the end of the day, when we put our feet on the ground, that segment is not as big as one may think. The mass market, the major part of the market is not yet there. The tourists that we have experience, from what we see. At the end of the day, this segment, this sector is a very cost conscious sector. Of course, there are people who are ready to pay for.
Okay, I believe we have. Okay, he's still there.
Okay, better service. As I was mentioning, Manash, where I
yes, you're still there, Andrew. Yes.
Okay. So basically, as I was saying, that sometimes we blow up this idea that tourists are searching for green hotels, etc. There is an interest, yes, but it's not the key factor of why tourists go to a destination or an accommodation instead of the other. This sector is a very cost-conscious sector. It's a fact. So we need to be very careful in keeping in mind that while we're doing this transition, while we're doing these changes, we retain the competitiveness of the industry. Otherwise, there's going to be a major conflict, and it will doom to fail. So again, I'm seeing that this proposed deal, is taking into consideration, seems to be listening to what have been said in the past, in terms maybe of mistakes done in the past, and it aims to be closer to the industry. However, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Okay, Abigail, from the Climate Action Authority, may I remind everyone who is participating and who has joined us for this webinar. Abigail, what role will the authority play in supporting Maltese industries in adopting greener practices and in leveraging the opportunities presented by the Clean Industrial Deal?
Before I go maybe on the opportunities and what the Climate Action Authority is doing, I want to maybe follow up a bit on a point which Andrew was highlighting.
Sure, go ahead.
The hospitality industry and the demand. What is the demand? Because in reality, we need to understand what the demand is. So I do understand that at this stage in Malta, I'm going to speak about Malta, the demand for a green certified building, I don't know, LEED, BREEAM levels, just an energy efficient building, because it doesn't need to be certified to be energy efficient, is maybe not on the high side. If there isn't the supply for it, the demand most likely cannot be there. And I'm speaking about this because recently I was in a discussion also with the tourism authority, and we were speaking about this. So it's all about the economic advantage and about economic opportunities. So what I believe in is, if there is, and I'm speaking about this from my previous life, or maybe in the hospitality industry as well, if there is the opportunity for a developer to have a better, and I'm not just speaking about green in terms of renewables. Green is also about having an energy efficient operation, but also in achieving a high standard for its occupants. If you have that, so if you're giving luxury, if you're giving a better quality of life for the residents within the building, and also being efficient, I think it's a win-win situation for the developer and also for the owner of the building. So what I'm trying to say here is, it's all about whether we want to shift the mentality of what is economically viable and what the opportunities are. And that's why I link this with green practices and what the authority needs to do, because I believe we need to work more. Obviously, we've been established for a few months, but we need to work more hand in hand with, in this case, the hospitality industry, to understand what the main blocking points are and what would make an owner shift towards this transition, because there are already hotel, for instance, owners which are doing this transition because it pays off to go green. But obviously there needs to be a balance between going green to what the economic opportunity is, because if someone goes to a board of directors and they tell them that they want to certify a building without being financially feasible, the board of directors will not move towards going green, obviously. And I think that is part of what authorities, not just the Climate Action Authority, needs to do, that we present a leverage for the shift to be done. And that is why we need to also see how we can access funds towards this transition, so that we'll see how we can actually do this shift. And I'm specifically saying hospitality is not just the hospitality industry, it's the building industry per se. Because we know for a fact that we have a gap there with regards to the buildings industry, and we need to obviously tackle it. I don't know, Andrew, if you wanted to comment on this, because I was seeing
Go
you.
ahead, Andrew.
Basically, we're saying the same thing.
I believe so as well. Yeah.
As long inti, why would you embark on such initiatives? First of all, if that would help you increase sales. So that means that there is a good number of people who would be ready to pay more if your hotel is green. Now, it's not a question of Malta or here or there. In general, now there isn't such a big market segment, I would say, in the international market, where there are people who are ready to pay more just because your hotel is green, just because your operation is green. That's a state of fact. We just came from Norway, from the meeting of the associations of Europe, and it's very evident. Right? That doesn't mean that we need to stop going green, and we need to keep on exploring. So one has to build up on what are the benefits of going green, not just by focusing on the demand, because the demand is limited. So what are the other possible options? It's basically putting down the costs. If you reduce the cost and improve efficiency by introducing new ways of how you operate your hotel, your restaurant, then of course there will be a take-up. Now, many a times, as we've seen in the past, per se, the systems presented to us, the products presented to us, weren't enough to help us to reduce the cost. So that's where then government came in and supported with incentives in the case of the solar panels. probably if government wasn't there to subsidize elements of cost in installing solar panels, probably the solar panels would have been the success that we've seen. So the intervention of government in making it more accessible in terms of the cost itself for implementation, and then when you put everything together, that led to a reduction in the energy bills. I mean, that was the carrot which attracted, in my case, the industry which I represent. So now with the clean industrial deal, I'm seeing that the scope is going to be wider and more complex, which again we welcome it, because at the end of the day we also recognize that we are part of the environment. We want cleaner seas. We want more greenery around us, and we believe that the more beautiful our destination is, the more we attract people. So we are for that, but we have to be with our feet on the ground. We cannot just shift major responsibilities on the businessmen who are already facing major difficulties in keeping their operations going within the industry they're operating in my case, the tourism industry, a very dynamic industry, I repeat.
Diskussjoni, dibattitu verament interessanti hemmhekk bejn l-erba' esperti li proponilkom illum f'dan il-podcast, the MBB podcast, kien parti dak minn webinar li kien organizzat minna flimkien ma' rappreżentanza tal-Kummissjoni Ewropea f'Malta u mill-Climate Action Authority, webinar illi fih iddiskutejna il-Clean Industrial Deal. Jiena Mario Xwiereb, nirringrazzjakom ħafna, nerġgħu nkunu magħkom fil-ġimgħat li ġejjin. Dan il-podcast huwa miġġub lilkom minn the Energy and Water Agency, l-Aġenzija l-Enerġija u l-Ilma, bl-għajnuna tal-Awtorità Maltija għat-Turiżmu, Finance Malta, M7 Alpha, the VBL Group, your gateway to Valletta. The Malta-EU Business Gateway, the MBB podcast, huwa produzzjoni ta' The Malta Business Bureau, kontenut ta' Mario Xwiereb, assistenza teknika Ralf Grima. The Malta Business Bureau hija l-fera ta' konsulenza ta' The Malta Chamber of Commerce u l-Malta Hotels and Restaurants Association.